Hey, everybody, it's Friday night. You know what that means. It is time for the Fortress of Rock episode 142 here on May the 3rd, 2024. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard. Now, I am fibbing a little bit. I am lying just a little bit. It's not Friday night, it is early Friday afternoon. As I put this episode together, segments have been recorded out of sequence, but the show still should flow phenomenally for you. You should not notice any difference. The reason why we're recording early is because concert season 2024 for the Fortress of Rock kicks off this weekend. Tonight, as you're listening to this, I will most likely be listening to Fuel, Saliva, and Seether. And then tomorrow night, it is Judas Priest and Sabaton. So next week, obviously, on Breakdown, you will hear my reviews of both shows. Nice little double shot of rock and roll for you. But as always, we start off with news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. So let us get into it, shall we? Some of these news items are going to tie into some things we're going to talk about in segment 2, in this week's breakdown segment. So we've got news about Motley Crue. We've got news about Sammy Hagar tying into Van Halen. Sammy Hagar, you pay for this. So it's not really the be-all, end-all of accolades when it boils down to it. But congratulations to Sammy Hagar for getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They had the ceremony last day of April the 30th. Had a couple friends with him. Of course, Michael Anthony is there. And I'm not a big John Mayer fan, but I have to give John Mayer some props, some credit for number one, being there for Sammy Hagar, and number two, for wearing a classic For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge t-shirt. Very cool. So for once, thumbs up to John Mayer. And of course, later on this summer, I will be seeing the Best of All Worlds tour with Joe Satriani doing his best to honor the memory of Eddie Van Halen again. We'll talk more about him and his son later. Another band we're going to be talking about more later on is Motley Crue. Now, they're being very careful about coming back into the spotlight, not with the concerts. We know the concerts, the stadium tour with Def Leppard, big production. Talking more about introducing John 5 as the new guitarist. Acrimony is split with Mick Mars. You guys know all about it. We've talked about it many times here on the podcast in the past. But they're being very careful about bringing John 5 along. So they played a secret show under the name of Dogs of War months ago. And then it turns out that's the first song official release from this new lineup for Motley Crue. And we'll review Dogs of War in segment 2. But they have got another quote-unquote secret show. And if you live around the New York area, tickets might be gone already. You've still got a couple days, though, to figure something out, because this second secret Motley Crue club show will take place May the 6th. This episode, of course, dropping on the 3rd at New York's Bowery Ballroom. And the band is going this time under the pseudonym of 1981. And Motley Crue, those guys are nothing if not smart marketers. They know how to control their image. So I'm wondering if this is in the same way Dogs of War ended up being A single later on is 1981. Down the road, going to end up being the second song we hear from the new lineup with John 5. The Rolling Stones have officially kicked off their Hackney Diamonds tour here in the U.S. That started off on April the 28th in Houston, and by all accounts, for as old as they are still bringing it. And I looked at the set list for that opening night show, and it looked tremendous. Couple new songs sprinkled in, couple of deeper tracks, but you still got all of the classics you would expect. And I cannot mortgage my house again to go see the Rolling Stones, but God, I would just love one time to see them live, to hear Gimme Shelter and Sympathy for the Devil. Those two, by far and away, my favorite Stone songs of all time. Now, we're going to be talking the third band that's going to carry over into the breakdown segment a little bit. And I'll explain that more in segment 2, is Bon Jovi. Now, we know they've got a new album coming out, Forever. I was not impressed with the first single, Legendary. I'm starting to wonder if I don't have a bias now against Bon Jovi, despite the fact that I love them. I thought they were phenomenal throughout the 80s, even through the 90s and into the early 2000s. But we'll discuss more again in segment 2. For News of the World, the Bon Jovi news item we've got is that they, like Kiss, like ABBA, might be more than willing to use avatars and holograms to carry on into the future. Well-documented voice problems with John Bon Jovi. Might not have much of a future when it comes to live performances, so now John Bon Jovi's talking about the possibility of carrying on Bon Jovi as avatars and holograms. So, ain't AI great, kids? A couple of acts, a couple of performers that we wouldn't normally talk about here on the Fortress of Rock. Not necessarily my cup of tea in either case. One of them is a rock band. So we'll start off there with Linkin Park. And I know there's a lot of you out there, blasphemy. How can you say you don't like Linkin Park? I don't like Linkin Park. I've never, will never be a fan of that rap rock. To me, it's garbage. To me, it is just absolute garbage. But that's my opinion. You are more than entitled to listen to all the Linkin Park you want and enjoy it. Of course, we know about the tragic suicide of their front man, their lead singer, Chester Bennington. So the band really hasn't been together since then. There are discussions in place. From what I'm hearing, discussions in place, negotiations in place for a reunion tour. And they are talking about bringing on a female vocalist. Right now, there is no commitment, but they want to go with a female vocalist. Rumors are swirling that it could be Amy Lee of Evanescence. When approached about it, she said, "Nobody has talked to me. If I could fit it in my schedule, I would probably sign up in a second." I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but you get the idea. She sounds like she would be down with fronting Linkin Park on a tour. But of course, she's got her own band, so it could be tricky. But we see Miles Kennedy, we see Slash, we see a lot of different musicians who can juggle 2 or 3 acts. Jack White famously did it for a long time. Solo career, the Raconteurs, the Dead Weather. It can be done, but yes, you have schedules you have to work around. Be interesting to see if Amy Lee does jump on board and fronts Linkin Park. Now, the other act, definitely would not normally talk about Taylor Swift on the Fortress of Rock. I know. You guys are out there. Then what are you doing, Maestro? Why are you even broaching this subject? Because you know how much I love the music charts, even though right now I am not a fan of Billboard. I don't think they know what they're doing. They have not handled the transition to digital music, in my opinion, fairly or well. And I think they are responsible for a lot, along with Spotify and iTunes. They are responsible for a lot of the misery that rock and roll bands go through when it comes to trying to sell albums. Billboard just, the minute you put out a new album, if you are a rock band, a hard rock, heavy metal band, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, you might get 1 week towards the top of the charts and then that album will disappear. Whereas Journey's greatest hits and the Eagles' greatest hits stay at the top of the charts for years and years and years and years. And we've talked about it. It's because now with digital music, Billboard stupidly counts 12 streams from a particular band as an album, quote unquote, sale. So, sure, you and I are going to go out there and we're going to listen to the classic rock that we love. I just don't think it's right that if I want to, on a Saturday afternoon, listen to the Eagles' greatest hits or listen to Queen's greatest hits, that automatically becomes a sale of an album for them. I mean, my God, I should be keeping Van Halen in the top 200 on the Billboard album charts by myself. Not really, but you know what I mean. I listen to Van Halen almost weekly. I always get in the mood to listen to one of their albums. I'm a Van Halen fan, and I'm saying it's not right. They should get money for it. They should get residuals, but the connection between that being credited as an album sale and bumping them up on the current album charts just seems wrong to me. You're not making enough room. You're not giving enough space for new music doing this. How is new music supposed to get exposed? How is it supposed to breathe if you don't give it some sort of publicity when it comes out? There should be a limit, and they used to have a limit, but then they got rid of it and they decided, no, any album, doesn't matter how old it is, we'll put it on the top 200. And that was not the case in the 70s and the 80s into the early 90s. But again, transitioning from physical sales to digital music caused all these problems. Long story short, or short story long, Taylor Swift going over to the Billboard Hot 100. Songs, of course, now, not albums, but in the same sense, if it makes sense, streaming dictates now what the top songs of the week are. And of course, Taylor Swift is a megastar. We arguably have not seen anything like this since the Beatles. Taylor Swift here this week claims the top 14 spots on the Billboard Hot 100. Yes, the top 14 spots. Of course, this is a record. I believe it's every freaking song off of her new album, The Tortured Poets Department. To me, again, it's wrong. It's just wrong. You are acting like nobody else has any music out there worth listening to. And I get it. Taylor Swift has a legion of fans that are ridiculously loyal. But it just doesn't sit well with me. There's something screwed up in the formula here. The discouragement you are giving to all the other acts, almost all the other acts. Well, what's the point? We're never going to get a top 40 hit. Radio, I don't even know what kind of an imprint, what kind of an influence radio has anymore. Whereas, of course, back in the old days, it was a major, major part of deciding what the top albums were and what the top songs were, especially the top songs. And I don't know how you fix it, but I think it's ridiculous and I think it's stupid, and you are just causing more harm than good by doing this to the music industry as a whole. And I am not exonerating, again, the streaming services are also to blame here. So congratulations to Taylor Swift. And kudos to her for setting this record. You just wonder what, under these rules, and I know you can't do it, it's beyond apples to oranges, but I just wonder under these rules how the Beatles would have actually performed on the charts back in their heyday. When you had a massive album like a Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, or a Hotel California by the Eagles, or Pyromania from Def Leppard, or Escape from Journey, Don't Say No from Billy Squier. When all those albums were out, those artists would have had 5 or 6 songs high on the charts at the same time if these rules applied. If, again, we can't go back and change things, but if there were streaming services back then. You look at movies, you look at the box office numbers. They adjust them. If you really dive deep into the box office numbers, it's not that hard to go out there and find multiple websites they will show you the adjusted for inflation numbers. So you can see what Gone with the Wind would have really done in this day and age as opposed to when it was released. Same thing with the first Star Wars. And on and on and on. And I know the streaming situation mucks it up. But there has got to be a way to fix this for the benefit of everyone in music, in rock and roll. Just like they're trying to fix the ticketing situation. How about we fix the Billboard charts? How about we come up with an alternate? Who says Billboard has to be the be-all, end-all expert when it comes to deciding what the number one song and what the top albums are? Maybe it should be the Fortress of Rock. I'll bear that burden. I'll take it over if they want to get together all these artists and performers and label heads. I'll be more than happy to take the burden on. Little bit of tour news. Not much, but a little bit of tour news. Again, going back to the 80s, my wheelhouse. Double bill of Squeeze and Boy George. Of course, Boy George, most famous for being in Culture Club, when it comes to music at least. They are getting together for 20 United States dates. I do not believe Boy George is going to be the opener on all of those dates. So be sure to check before you buy tickets. But Squeeze and Boy George, 20 U.S. dates in August and September of 2024. Then we've got David Gilmour, formerly, of course, of Pink Floyd. And there's some scuttlebutt as he goes back out on the road and starting to put out new music. If he were to go on tour beyond what we're going to discuss here in a minute, that he's talking about not playing any Pink Floyd songs that Roger Waters wrote. And that will disappoint a lot of fans, but we know about the animosity that's going on within the ranks of the surviving members of Pink Floyd, and we know what a jerk. And again, I'm keeping it family friendly. What an absolute jerk Roger Waters is in real life. How difficult he has got to be to deal with. So David Gilmour thinking about not playing some of those classic Pink Floyd songs if Roger Waters was involved. Now, for right now, again, he's putting out new music. I don't know if we're going to delve into that here on The Fortress. I was never a huge Pink Floyd fan. Many other bands, performers with new stuff out that I would like to listen to instead. But for right now, David Gilmour has got 6 shows in October at the Royal Albert Hall, the legendary Royal Albert Hall in London, England. So if you are over the pond listening to this and you're a Pink Floyd fan, you can go check out David Gilmour at the Royal Albert Hall in October. Now, to wrap things up here on News of the World, no, we're not wrapping it up yet. You know that's segment 4. But to put a bow on things here in News of the World, of course, it becomes more and more frequent when we have to talk about death and the music icons and idols that we listened to as we were growing up. And one of these we just discussed last week in I Want to Go Back, his birthday. And unfortunately, he has passed away. And that would be guitar legend Duane Eddy. And as I mentioned last week, we mentioned birthday. Birthday of Duane Eddy was April the 26th, 1938. And unfortunately now, he has left us. Guitar legend Duane Eddy has passed. And then this one kind of hits me pretty deeply. If you've been listening to the podcast over the last 2.5 years, you know one of the bands that really influenced me at the beginning when I started to get into music in the mid-70s was ELO. And of course, everybody associates ELO with Jeff Lynne. And to a point, rightfully so. But there were a couple of other steady forces, let's say, within ELO. A couple of members who stuck it out for the long run with Jeff Lynne. Of course, Bev Bevan was one of them. And Richard Tandy, keyboardist for the Electric Light Orchestra. And unfortunately, Richard Tandy has passed away. So thoughts and prayers go out to the family, the friends of Richard Tandy and Duane Eddy, all the fans. 2 big losses this week, 2 very significant losses in the world of rock and roll. Of course, ELO is going out on their farewell tour. Fortunate enough to have seen them at least once, not in their glory days, but still. Got to see them a few years ago, and it was a phenomenal show. Dare I say, one of the best concerts I've ever seen. It would probably easily be top 10, if not top 5. But that'll do it for News of the World. Again, kind of a piecemeal episode here where we're putting things together out of sequence, but you should not really notice because I've got it all planned out, all structured, so it is all good for you, the listener. And you know what we've been doing here lately as we start to transition to a different recording platform. We have got, instead of my old cheesy out-of-date promos, we have got little short musical, probably AI produced 2 or 3 second transition pieces. So you get one of those here, hang on through that for a couple seconds, and Breakdown is up next. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, segment 2 here, episode 142 on May the 3rd, 2024, is of course Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Doing things a little bit differently here for the next couple weeks. Next week, we will have our 2 massive concert reviews. We'll have our songs that we try to fit in 2, 3, 4 songs every week to break down for you. But we have got a lot of streaming documentaries out there to discuss. We've got 2 this week and then 2 next week. But we're going to talk about all 4 of them. Let's talk about the ones that we're going to give you full reviews on next week. Bob Marley, movie that was in the theaters, did very, very well, just short of $100 million at the domestic box office. Music biopics, for the most part, doing very, very well. A little bit hit and miss. I'm hearing that the Amy Winehouse biopic is not expected to do gangbusters, but we've had Bohemian Rhapsody and Elvis, and now Bob Marley, Rocket Man, of course. I really wish I could have gotten the full review ready for you for Bob Marley One Love this week, but I will admit this movie is a little bit of a slog for me. Unlike you, I know a lot of you out there, you sit down, you can binge watch TV, and you can watch 4, 5, 6 hours straight, and you have no problem getting through a 2-hour movie without taking more than a bathroom break or 2. But if the movie does not completely bowl me over, I usually try to split it up into at least 2 pieces. I like to dissect my movies. I like to look at a lot of different things in a movie, not trying to sound pretentious. But over the years, I've read a lot about film, took a film class or 2 at the University of Miami. So there are different things that I might look for. There are things in there you look for that I don't. But I will admit a couple things before we move on, and just giving you a little preview of my review of Bob Marley One Love. Number one, something that a lot of you out there do that I do not normally do is turn on subtitles. Many times I've been tempted because dialogue, it seems like in this day and age, people talk very fast or they mumble, and it could just be me getting old. But with the thick Rastafarian accents in Bob Marley One Love, I had to break down and turn on the subtitles, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to understand half of what the characters were saying. I'm sorry, it's a fact. Don't say that there's something prejudiced about me. It is a thick, thick accent that is very, very hard to listen to. It just is. So there's that. Had to turn on subtitles for it. And then it also, along with this other documentary we're going to be reviewing next week, also tends to be one of those documentaries where they whitewash all the bad stuff. In this case, it's a biopic as opposed to a straight-on documentary, but you can still whitewash and you can still cover up or minimize the negatives and try to accentuate all the positives, and that's fine. Narrative choice. I get it. But it is very obvious to me in Bob Marley, One Love, at least I'm about 3/5 of the way through, let's say. It is very obvious to me that they gloss over a lot of the negatives from Bob Marley and basically try to make him out to be some kind of a saint. I will be interested to see how the rest of the movie plays out. But I am not a marijuana guy, and if you are, sorry, never going to agree with you. Never, ever, ever going to agree with you on it. There's so much hypocrisy going around with marijuana. Great Britain wants to ban all smoking when it comes to tobacco. I guarantee you, Great Britain, if they somehow push that ban through, and I don't smoke anything, I think that's a massive infringement on personal rights. As long as you're smoking in your own house, I don't see what the big issue is. It's always about when you get out in public and what you do with it in public that bothers me. And so Bob Marley and his, he's smoking pot left and right, upside down, right side out throughout this entire movie. But there is to me, a very bothersome scene at the very beginning where he's driving in Jamaica with a joint, smoking a joint with his 2 young sons in the car with him. And I don't believe they're even buckled in. I don't believe there's seatbelts in the car or they're not using them. And this is supposed to be our hero. If there would have been a massive outcry if he'd been holding a 16-ounce Budweiser or guzzling from a bottle of Jim Beam, but because he's smoking pot, it's okay. And again, this ties back in to what I was talking about with Great Britain. They will never ban marijuana smoking. That's your hypocrisy. They'll never, ever ban now. We've gone down that road. They'll never ban marijuana smoking now. But tobacco is evil. Tobacco's evil. And I told you, I don't smoke at all. But there's a very, very big, vast hypocrisy about tobacco bad, marijuana good. You inhale that into your lungs, that is a health problem. And I know that's what's at the root of Great Britain trying to ban smoking. But one last time, hypocrisy. And of course, here in America, they have just lightened the classification for marijuana, which, again, fine. It's not my thing, will never be my thing, was never my thing in the past. I still think I have many, many issues and problems with it. I think it's substance abuse. I don't want to hear about medicinal value. You've got people out there who scream and cry at the top of their lungs about, oh, it does this and this and this, and it's so great for this and this and this. But we somehow always gloss over the bad stuff. How you smoke pot and you go out and drive, it's just like you were drinking and driving. Again, hypocrisy. Drunk driving, terrible, awful, and it is. Smoking pot and going out and driving, what's the big deal? If I have to explain that to you guys, this might be the wrong podcast for you. This ties into Bon Jovi. Not the pot necessarily, but the whitewashing, the covering up of all the bad stuff, or at least downplaying it. And there's another scene in Bob Marley's One Love where they make it out like he and Rita are inseparable and there's never a problem and they were meant to be together. And there's a very, very brief, just a few seconds of an implication that he was screwing around on her. But they downplay it in favor of making him out to be a hero and a martyr. Now, Bon Jovi, Of course, you guys probably know about the 4-part docuseries on Hulu, Thank You, Good Night, the Bon Jovi story. That is a long, long, long slog. 2 hours of Bob Marley, almost 6 hours of Bon Jovi and John and his sycophants in the band. I'm sorry, they are. Tico Torres and David Bryan. Could their noses be any further up John Bon Jovi's butt? I'm halfway through. I got through the first 2 episodes. I loved how they ended the first episode. You haven't heard anything about Richie Sambora, and they bring him in at the end. And I believe I'm paraphrasing, but his last line to close out the first episode is, "So we going to tell the lies or the truth here or what?" Now, I will say this. It's well documented that he had substance abuse issues that derailed his participation in the band. And I'm wondering throughout this, once you get into his discussions and his takes on everything that happened in the Bon Jovi heyday throughout Slippery When Wet in New Jersey, he seems like he might have a couple adult cocktails in him while he's talking for this documentary. He just doesn't seem clear and lucid like the rest of the band does. Anyway, still got 2 episodes to go, so I cannot judge. I cannot give you a full-fledged, fully informed opinion yet. But I will next week. I will get through the final 3 hours, roughly 3 hours of this. I mentioned this in segment 1, I do not have a great feeling right now about John Bon Jovi. And I know I'm bitter, and they do address in this documentary the specific show in 2022 that I went to see in Indianapolis. And he basically tells you flat out it was a miserable show. In so many words, he says it was a miserable show. Give me my money back, John. You shouldn't have been out on tour. And you guys will have to watch this documentary. You'll get more detail that will show you why John Bon Jovi doesn't care about the fans. He rarely talks about the fans. He talks more about himself. At one point, he talks about, as they're setting up for a show and trying to get the beginning set up. And I'm paraphrasing again, but I'm pretty close. Comes out and goes, okay, so I come out and the crowd goes crazy. Accolades, accolades, accolades for me. That's a pretty heavy ego there. Accolades, accolades, accolades for me. And while a lot of people, and I'm sure we'll get through, when we get through this, Richie Sambora will be painted out to be a bad guy. Everything I've read says he does get painted out to be the villain in this. I still think it's John Bon Jovi. I think John Bon Jovi has gotten way too much positive press for doing way too little. Lots of acts have sold tens of millions of albums, and it doesn't mean they are legends. It doesn't mean they're high, top quality level bands. And of course, that's up for debate. One of those bands, also in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like John Bon Jovi, this I have a full review of. And it's almost the exact opposite of Thank You, Good Night, whereas that is almost 6 hours of Bon Jovi, Bon Jovi, Bon Jovi. Recently added to Netflix, a 2018 documentary now. Going in, I did not realize, I thought this was a new documentary, and it is 6 years old. Duran Duran. Title of the documentary is There's Something You Should Know. Again, made in 2018. So you don't get a lot of insight into their election into the Hall of Fame, the Rock Hall of Fame, the recent health issues with Andy Taylor, the last few albums they've put out, no mention of those. I think the last album they mention in this is Paper Gods, which, if I'm correct, came out in 2015. And it's only an hour long. Compare that to 6 hours of Bon Jovi. We only get 1 hour to go through the entire career, at least up till 2015, of Duran Duran. Now, where Bon Jovi's Thank You, Good Night, you could tell they put some money into it. High quality, very well produced. Of course, John Bon Jovi sits in a soundstage with a golden glow around him. Duran Duran, the 4 core members still with the band, basically do a lot of the interviews and talk about the careers and the different bands. I mean, Arcadia and the Power Station. They're in cars when they're doing these interviews and these discussions. In a lot of these scenes, in There's Something You Should Know. So, again, when I get to Bon Jovi, a full review, it'll be very interesting to do a complete compare and contrast between that and Duran Duran. Now, if you're a Duran Duran fan, you'll probably enjoy this, but there's not a lot there. There's not enough time. Whereas I think 6 hours of Bon Jovi is too much. 1 hour of Duran Duran does not give you nearly enough time to get in to all the details of what they went through. And I will say it again. I keep using the term whitewashing. There's not a lot of negative stuff here in There's Something You Should Know. Not a lot of negative at all. They talk about breakups with Andy Taylor, and everybody but Simon Le Bon and Nick Rhodes at some point left the band and then came back. But you really don't get a lot of the behind the music, seedy underbelly stuff. So this is a pretty superfluous documentary about Duran Duran. I don't think you really need to see it. It's not going to do a lot for you. But if you are really, really big, if you're a really big Duran Duran fan, there's probably nothing new here. Let's put it that way. So as much as it pains me to say it, I would probably stay away from There's Something You Should Know. If they ever come out with a better, more in-depth look at the band, then I think that might be worth your time. Now, I mentioned Behind the Music. The fourth of these autobiography biopic documentaries that we're discussing. This one I've got another full review for you, just like Duran Duran. They've dropped some new episodes on Paramount Plus of Behind the Music. I am not watching most of these because now all they focus on is hip hop and rap. Occasionally, maybe some country. Very rarely, again, very rarely, do they want to talk about rock and roll anymore. But there is one stellar episode that just dropped on May the 1st featuring Wolfgang Van Halen. And it is moving. It brought me to tears. As much as this is about Wolfgang Van Halen, it is also about Eddie Van Halen. Valerie Bertinelli makes a lot of appearances, lots of screen time for her. I don't know, that bothered me a little bit. She kind of goes back and forth with me when I listen to her talk about her relationship with Eddie. And everybody knows, even diehard Van Halen fans know, Eddie Van Halen could not have been an easy human being to get along with. People say he had a great heart. Obviously one of the greatest, if not the greatest, in my opinion, the absolute greatest guitarist of all time. But the perfectionism, the ego, the substance abuse had to be a very difficult person to deal with. They do a great job of emphasizing his love for his son. That is never put into doubt. Maybe one scene where Wolfgang has to basically call his father out and say, "You're screwing everything up here. You need to get your act together." Again, my criticism of this Behind the Music episode has to be a little bit too much Valerie Bertinelli. And I get it, she's Wolfgang Van Halen's mother. I get it. We also get some comments from Valerie Bertinelli's brother, who happens to be Wolfie's uncle through marriage. Don't hear anything from Alex Van Halen, Michael Anthony, Sammy Hagar, David Lee Roth. So do not expect that. This is a family affair. It is still well done. It is still moving. They still do a great job of promoting Wolfgang Van Halen and Mammoth WVH while touching on very well, with a lot of depth, touching on the behind the scenes drama of his childhood and growing up with Eddie Van Halen. One interesting note before we move on, and I definitely recommend you check this out if you have Paramount Plus. Even if you're not a Van Halen fan, I think you will be moved by this story. But for the Van Halen fans out there, in News of the World, we've always talked about any and every little tidbit we get about the infighting, even to this day. Sammy ripping into Dave, Dave ripping into Sammy, Dave ripping into Wolfgang. Now, I don't know when this particular Behind the Music was filmed. They mention Mammoth 2, so it's not very, very old. But again, Wolfgang doesn't mention the album, so they could have inserted that, and this could be an older interview with him, the sit-down itself. But for all these reports of infighting, the interesting thing I picked up on as a Van Halen fan, Wolfgang talks a lot about David Lee Roth, or at least talks about him. Talks about Dave. Maybe not a lot, but he does mention him by name as Wolfgang was brought into the group when they got back together with David Lee Roth. The interesting thing I find, he does not mention Sammy Hagar by name. He mentions him once or twice as that other singer. Very interesting, possibly very telling. But check out Behind the Music, the new episode with Wolfgang Van Halen. 2 new songs for you. We talked about Motley Crue and a secret show in News of the World. Well, we've got that new song we discussed in segment 1, Dogs of War, to review for you. First official song with John 5 on guitar. I will admit I'm torn on this, and I'm probably going to end up liking it more than you guys will. It's very repetitive. There is not a lot to this song, Dogs of War. John 5's guitar work is very solid. They probably made the right move in switching to him from Mick Mars based on what Mick Mars' solo work sounds like. John 5 definitely brings a distinctive guitar voice to the proceedings. But Dogs of War, very repetitive. I like it. It's got a little sleazy sing-song chant quality to it. Lyrics, very sparse again. Not much there. I'm fully admitting, as I recommend it to you guys to go out and listen to, A lot of you probably aren't going to like it. A lot of you are probably going to go, what? This is not that good. This doesn't compare to Shout at the Devil or Dr. Feelgood. Not saying it does. I'm just saying maybe because this is a new era that I'm looking forward to for Motley Crue. Probably their last best shot at being viable commercially. Not a bad first step. Finally, Billy Idol. The reissue, the deluxe reissue of Rebel Yell is out. We recently reviewed a cover song that is featured on this new edition of Rebel Yell, the old Rose Royce song, Love Don't Live Here Anymore. And I also, when I read the release documentation, the press release about this reissue, they mentioned there was a unreleased song that was going to be on the Rebel Yell Special Edition, and what I read made it sound like it was pretty impressive. And if it made the cut to be on this special edition, you figure, maybe it's not bad. Then again, it could just be a let's throw everything from the vault we can out there and see if people like it or not, and give the fans what they want. And I have no problem with that. I'd rather have everything out there, warts and all, the bad stuff along with the interesting, than have them just hide it away forever. They've already got their reputation, guys like Billy Idol, other bands who've done the same thing. You're already legends. You're not really going to denigrate yourself. We know it's the scraps. We know it's the stuff that you didn't think was good enough to make the final edition of the album to begin with. So we're smart. Rock fans are smart. We're not going to hold it against you. And I think that's the case here with Best Way Out of Here. Now, paraphrasing, but Billy Idol basically described this song in some of his interviews as a Prince knockoff. And you kind of get that vibe, definitely get that vibe from this song. It's a little bit too disco-y for me. And just like Dogs of War, not a lot going on with the lyrics. Very repetitive. Maybe not quite as bad as Dogs of War, but still very, very sparse lyrically. Not a lot of depth. And along with the disco vibe, to me, this is not a hidden gem. They probably made the right decision leaving this off the initial release of Rebel Yell. So I cannot recommend Best Way Out of Here, even if you're a big Billy Idol fan, and I am. It's a miss. It's not a disaster. And I still, as I just mentioned, I still want everything out of the vaults from all of these artists. We want to hear it all. This is why we loved your music. We still love your music. We want to hear the demos, the things that you didn't think were good enough at the time. There might still be a little bit of magic in there. But you have to trust these artists and know that they made the right call, their producers, their engineers, by not putting these songs on the initial releases. That's the case here with Billy Idol and Best Way Out of Here. All right, we're halfway home here on the Fortress of Rock. 2 segments left. Gotta hop in the rock and roll DeLorean with Doc Brown. It's time for I Want to Go Back. Our look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock history. Quick, cheesy, 3 or 4 second music interlude. And I'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, episode 142 here, Friday night, May the 3rd, 2024. I am your humble and gracious host, the Maestro Kevin Crane. This is a little bit of a mess this week. Hopefully you won't be able to tell on your end. but my normal taping schedule is all in disarray because of concerts, jury duty, this, that, and the other. So, that being said, again, hopefully you're not telling any difference between this episode and any of the usual past awesome episodes that you're used to getting from the Fortress of Rock. Now, Doc Brown sitting to my left, rolling his eyes. Get on with it, idiot. Get on with it. We're in the rock and roll time stream here for I Want to Go Back. Each and every week, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. Anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock and roll history. Now, even though Doc Brown's not going to like it because he's already up to 1.21 gigawatts, he wants me to get on with the show. I do have to take care of business, as you kids know. First up, let's do sources. Help. Sources. Can't do it all by myself. Got friends, got family, just like most of you do, but when it comes to something like this extravaganza, I need help with the details, with the stories, with the history, especially in segment 1 and here in segment 3. And that help, for the most part, comes from ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the mighty Van Halen newsdesk.com. Drop the mighty. And of course, we want you to be able to listen to us wherever you want to listen to us. It's all about you. You have options. You have choices. Right now, as of this week, you can listen to the Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, and Audible. And of course, do not forget to check out the Facebook page. Don't know yet. Not quite sure. Again, very chaotic week for the Maestro. So not quite sure yet what we're posting here tonight for your Weekend Rock project on Facebook. But we'll have something good. And then, of course, on Sunday, we will drop a new video, a new song off of YouTube for you. Because every Sunday is New Music Sunday on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. All right, got a lot to get through this week. Pretty busy week here when it comes to the history of rock and roll. Pretty busy day. May the 3rd, 2024. Let's go back in time and discuss. Let's start off with anniversaries this week. Going back to my wheelhouse, the 80s. May the 3rd, 1986, the number one song in the United States, Robert Palmer's Addicted to Love. Of course, Mr. Suave, Mr. Smooth had those great videos with the dancing, performing women behind him, not trying to cheapen it. Very interesting, very subtle how he pulled that off in his two biggest videos in the 80s. And they fit right in. The color scheme, everything fit right in with what Robert Palmer was all about. Again, the suave, debonair image he was trying to keep intact while still adding a little bit of that sleaze factor from the 80s, that little bit of sexuality, dare I say, since it's been a motif throughout this episode, a little bit of Motley Crue, bringing that into the Robert Palmer wheelhouse. Now, this one might take you by surprise. Same day, May the 3rd, 1986, we're going to talk about Tony Bennett. Now, we all know, smooth voice, great voice, one of the greatest singers of all time. But back in 1986, he really wasn't there yet. He had had his success earlier on in life. His resurgence, his comeback, was still a few years away. But you know how I am. I am nutsy cuckoo gaga when it comes to the history of music, when it comes to the format. Whether we're talking about vinyl, cassettes, 8 tracks, digital, CD, and then, of course, the Billboard charts. We talked about that in segment 1. Tony Bennett's The Art of Excellence on this day in 1986 was the first U.S. album released on CD instead of vinyl. Now, that's a key point, because I know we've talked about in the past, I believe Billy Joel, don't hold me to it, but I'm 90% sure Billy Joel, one of his albums was the first to be released on CD, period. But Tony Bennett's The Art of Excellence was the first U.S. album released on CD with no vinyl release at that time. And now look how things have changed. Kind of, sort of. May the 3rd, 1980. Arguably Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band's greatest album. I know there will be discussion and dissent, and that's good and fine. That's what it's all about. Unless you're an idiot on a college campus promoting hate and genocide. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band's Against the Wind was the number 1 album in the U.S. on this day, May the 3rd, in 1980. On this day, May the 3rd, 1976, Paul McCartney plays his first concert in the United States in approximately 10 years. A little bit of give and take there, but close to 10 years. It was the start of the Wings Over America tour in Texas. And of course, last week we talked about this bootleg / reissue, One Hand Clapping, coming out here in another month or two. May the 3rd, 1968. The Jimi Hendrix Experience records one of their most notable songs, and it has been done sometimes phenomenally, sometimes not so well. But of course, Stevie Ray Vaughan did an unbelievable version of Voodoo Chile. Again, on this day, May the 3rd, 1968, the Jimi Hendrix Experience records their version, the template, Voodoo Chile. Then finally, to wrap up anniversaries, on this day in 1952, again, dabbling. We've been all over the map a little bit, I'll admit. Talking about Taylor Swift. Probably going to talk about some other different genres here before this episode is over. I find this a very significant moment in music history, though. Back in 1952, Kitty Wells recorded the song It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. Why is this significant? Because Kitty Wells became the first number 1 country hit, that song, for a solo female artist. It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. Again, the first solo female artist, Kitty Wells, to hit number 1 on the country chart. My, how we have progressed, I would say. I'm not trying to be facetious. I just saw today, Beyonce 10 weeks, 10 weeks at the top of the country charts. The first female black vocalist to score a number one country song, and it stuck for 10 weeks. And I will not bring in my problems again with the Billboard charts like I did with Taylor Swift in segment 1. I won't do that because I feel like this is a much more legitimate milestone than Taylor Swift. Let's move on to birthdays here on the Fortress of Rock for May the 3rd. This one is interesting because I think we'll be talking a lot more about this band next week. May the 3rd, 1972, former Saliva singer Josie Scott. He was with the band from 1996 to 2011. Josie Scott, singer for Saliva, born on this day. And yes, Saliva is one of the bands we will be seeing tonight, actually, as this episode drops at the Big Growl in South Bend, Indiana. The concert season kicks off. Can't tell you how fantastic that is, how ecstatic I am. That means the beginning of summer. It means so many things, almost all of them positive. On this day, May the 3rd, 1959, David Ball, multi-instrumentalist for Soft Cell, was born. And of course, to this day, one of the most important lingering hits from the 80s is Tainted Love. I love this guy. I love this one. May the 3rd, 1953. Not an original member. He's still with them now to this day, though. He was there for the classic lineup through the late 70s and early 80s. Again, my wheelhouse. Bass player for REO Speedwagon. Occasionally lead vocalist on some really sneaky good songs for REO. Bruce Hall. Back on the Road Again. What an unbelievable song. And that was all Bruce Hall. Right now, Bruce Hall and Kevin Cronin, the only two, I can't say original members, but the only two members left in REO from that classic lineup, that high infidelity lineup. Happy birthday to Bruce Hall. And here's one where you get your yacht rock on, kids, and I'm fine with that. Old enough now where I have no shame. I've told you the stories about the disco in the 70s and Duran Duran and Wham and George Michael in the 80s and how, I've got to watch out for a reputation, some ridiculous reputation in high school and college. Can't let people know I listen to Wham. And then, of course, you did not want to let people know, especially if you were a guy, that you listened to Christopher Cross. Yes, Christopher Cross, born on this day, May the 3rd, 1951. And for a few years there, he was the big deal. Ride Like the Wind, Sailing, Arthur's Theme. What was it? Think of Laura, that sappy soap opera song. But he had some good stuff. 4 or 5 really, really good songs. And again, as I look back, I go, what was I thinking? That I just didn't proclaim. Nothing wrong with Christopher Cross. I can like Motley Crue and the Scorpions and like Christopher Cross too. And now, of course, as you get older, everybody's like, yeah, we're right there with you, Maestro. Listen to who you want to listen to and never let anybody shame you out of it. Now we go all the way back to May the 3rd, 1934. Getting into some heavy hitters here. On this day, 1934, Frankie Valli was born, of course. Frankie Valli with the Four Seasons, Big Girls Don't Cry. Not necessarily my particular cup of tea, but I respect and admire what Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons accomplished. Then we go back to May the 3rd, 1933. Hi! It's getting hot in a hot tub! Sorry. Anytime I think of James Brown, I've got to reference Eddie Murphy's classic Saturday Night Live skit. And in a way, I apologize. It's kind of denigrating the legend that was James Brown. But the sincerest form of flattery is imitation, right? So there you go. Born on this day in 1933, the great James Brown. Now we move back to May the 3rd, 1919. Maybe a very resonant, for better or for worse, birthday on this day, given the upheaval across college campuses in the United States. I personally think it's disgusting and abhorrent, but a lot of people I've talked to think this harkens right back into the 60s. The protests we saw with the Vietnam War, I think it's vastly different. But one of the biggest activists and singers out there, Pete Seeger. Of course, Bruce Springsteen did an entire album, the Seeger Sessions. Don't get me started on the false narrative that is Bruce Springsteen and how he pretends in a lot of different facets, in a lot of different ways. But I would say one of the true hippies out there. Born in 1919 on this day, May the 3rd, Pete Seeger. And then finally, to wrap up birthdays here on the Fortress of Rock, May the 3rd, 1903, cannot discuss music without one of the smoothest voices in the history of music. We've had a lot of them here in I Want to Go Back. We talked about Robert Palmer, Tony Bennett, Frankie Valli, James Brown, and now we end with the great Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was born on this day, May the 3rd, in 1903. So there you go, kids. That will do it for I Want to Go Back. Segment 3 here on the Fortress of Rock. Done. Hope you enjoyed it. Lots of very interesting historical nuggets and tidbits. Some that you might connect to more. Like me, just Bruce Hall, very underrated. I've always been a huge REO Speedwagon fan, and Bruce Hall, for the few songs he always contributed, never gets enough credit. Christopher Cross, of course, Bob Seger, Against the Wind, all such great moments in rock history. But we are not done yet. You know this. One final segment left as Doc Brown pulls the rock and roll DeLorean into the garage here at the Fortress of Rock. We're pulling up the drawbridge over the moat, but as we wind down, as we settle down, we've still got about 15 minutes to go as we have looked at the past. Here in I Want to Go Back, we looked at the present in our first two segments. Now, in segment 4, we look to the future. We gaze into the crystal ball for Wrap It Up. Coming up after a really brief, really quick, really cheesy music break. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Be right back. All right, everybody, winding things down here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 142, May the 3rd, 2024. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are, and you are the most important person out there. I'm not going to use PC garbage terms like self-care, but do what feels good for you. Take care of yourself. Be happy. Have fun. Do not waste a moment in your life. It is too short. Be with the people you love, your family, your friends. Listen to great music. Watch great movies. Do not waste a second. Do not waste a moment. We look to the future here in segment 4. You know this? Segment 4 is Wrap It Up, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. We'll discuss what we're going to review here in the coming weeks on the Fortress of Rock. And part of the reason this episode is a little disjointed is because of next week's episode. I've mentioned it, concert season is upon us. The weather is getting better. It's May. The unofficial kickoff to the summer movie season this weekend with The Fall Guy. And not one, but two massive concerts that we will review for you next week here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 143, dropping May the 10th. Here locally, where we record, where we have our studio, where we have the Fortress of Rock. Most years they have a little shindig called the Big Growl. Hard, heavy rock and roll. The venue changes. It's been at the local fairgrounds. It's been at a historic downtown venue. Now it's going to be at a baseball field, a minor league baseball field, the Big Growl. And among the acts this year, you will get reviews of Fuel, Saliva, and Seether. And then the next night, Saturday night, May the 4th. Yes, I know it's Star Wars Day, but I'm sorry. I'm going in a vastly different direction. We're going into the depths of hell with Judas Priest and Sabaton. I went so many years, decades without seeing Judas Priest. Now this will be the third time I get to see them in the last 4 or 5 years. And they have still, the first two shows, phenomenal. They sound outstanding. Rob Halford sounds great. Unlike a certain John Bon Jovi, who we discussed earlier. But next week, you get not one but two massive concert reviews to kick off the summer concert season on the Fortress of Rock in 2 weeks. Sebastian Bach's brand new solo album, former lead singer of Skid Row, Child Within the Man, will be the featured album review on episode 144, dropping May the 17th. In 3 weeks, Kings of Leon. I have loved the first 3 releases from this album, just like Sebastian Bach, by the way. Can we please have fun? What a fitting, apropos title for this day and age. Can we please have fun? The Great Kings of Leon, featured album review, episode 145 on May the 24th. And then finally, we wrap up the month of May. What a great month. What a great, great month May ends up being for the Fortress of Rock. Our final episode, 5 episodes in May. The final one, episode 146 on May the 31st of 2024, is the double album, the brand new double album from Collective Soul, Here to Eternity. Giving myself a little bit of extra time to get through all, I believe, 20 songs on Here to Eternity. Cannot wait to share my review with you of that. Gotta love Collective Soul. Gotta love them. They stay active. They put out new music as often as they can, as often as anybody else, for my money. Now, a new feature we started in 2024, of course, is our tribute to the old Billboard charts, the old radio days of Casey Kasem and America's Top 40, your Fortress of Rock number 1 album of the week and top songs of the week. And no, Taylor Swift does not inhabit the top 14 spots. Now, I have not been able to, again, chaotic, crazy week, been able to start getting back into Judas Priest and Invincible Shield yet. So as I'm taping this right now, I will carry over for the second week an album that's still growing on me. I still can't wholeheartedly recommend it. But Dark Matter from Pearl Jam gets a little bit better with each and every listen. Now, I will say this. 8 or 9 listens in, if it's not already a classic, I don't see how it's ever going to be, but it's getting, in small increments, better and better and better. So, for the second week in a row, Pearl Jam, Dark Matter, your number 1 album here on the Fortress of Rock. Top songs for the second week in a row. I just mentioned how much I love what I'm hearing from Kings of Leon. And the third single, Nothing to Do, might be the best song they've released so far from Can We Please Have Fun. So for the second week in a row, Nothing to Do by Kings of Leon, along with, and I cheat, I admit it with the songs, always very hard to pick one song, so I always like to pick 2. Going back to Dark Matter from Pearl Jam. 4 really, really fantastic songs on that album. Why I'm having issues with it is the rest of it. But there are 4 absolutely phenomenal songs on Dark Matter, and one of them that we really haven't given enough credit to is Waiting for Stevie. Beautiful, beautiful, awesome, well-written song. So along with Kings of Leon and Nothing to Do, Waiting for Stevie from Pearl Jam, your top songs of the week. As far as songs we're going to be listening to and reviewing in the future, we knocked a couple out this week. I admit Breakdown was a little weak. Tried to shift the focus over to movies and TV and streaming more so than the music itself. But sometimes you got to do it. You've got all these documentaries and all these stories out there, for better for worse. So a lot of these are carryovers from last week. Richie Sambora, we're still waiting to review I Pray. Now, supposedly he's got a second single dropping any minute. Supposedly doing 4 songs a week, every week for the month. So right now we've still only got I Pray. still looking to review the Hold Steady, the A side, B side of this single they've released. I respect and admire the old school tactic of releasing an A side and a B side, releasing a quote unquote single, an actual physical single. Although I guarantee it's not going to cost you $2. The Death of the Punchline and Radar and Lita coming up in the next few weeks on the Fortress of Rock. We talked about the Hives and the release of the deluxe edition of Lex Hives. 2 unreleased tracks from that we will review here soon. Insane and High School Shuffle. Again, once we get through this ridiculously busy week, next week should settle down. We'll be able to knock out a lot of this stuff. The Cold Stairs, great blues bass band. Friend of mine turned me on to last year. New song, Horse to Water. Now, the one new addition to this list, those are all carryovers, what I just mentioned from last week. The one new addition to this list, Deep Purple. On last week's episode 141, we talked about their brand new album, Equals One. The first release from Equals One from Deep Purple is Portable Door. And we'll have a review of that for you in the coming weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. Probably going to have another new song or two drop as we're taping this, as we get ready to release this episode, because again, this particular episode having to do it a little bit earlier than normal. So do not fret, do not worry. If you got Spotify and you have your new release radar for Fridays, and you see a couple new songs drop, and you go, wait, Maestro, why didn't you throw those on the roster for the upcoming weeks? Do not worry, do not fret. I will catch up, and I will have them on the roster here and wrap it up next week for future weeks. So again, get outside, look at the beautiful sunshine, the heat, getting up close to 80 here in the upper Midwest. Thank God. Although I have to admit, we've gotten away with a couple of very mild winters here recently, so I temper my expectations, but for now, it's all over. It's all over, and now it's just let the sunshine in. Take care of yourselves. Love the one you're with. Everybody out there in podcast land, in 7 days, episode 143 drops, and the 2024 concert season begins. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Take care, everybody. Peace out.